Monkey D. Luffy is a character whose scaling will forever live in controversy, with many people over the years giving their take on how fast or strong they think he is. And today, I'll be throwing my hat into the ring, going over how I scale, why I scale that way, and then I'll get into the feats for both AP and speed. First, I'll start with the ever-important topic of attack potency. What is AP? The general community will have you think that it's the DC or the total joules of an attack. However, it is better described by the joules per standardized volume of an attack. In my case, I'll be using the joules per cubic centimeter in Luffy's attacks. Now, you might be asking why AP is joules per standardized volume. And although there's a plethora of examples that I could give, I'll choose to go with the inverse square law. Simply put, the inverse square law states that the larger the volume in which a set amount of energy is spread, the less intense it will become. And what is one of the many SI units in which this intensity can be measured? Joules per standardized volume. Now with that out of the way, I'd like to get into statement scaling and why I generally steer clear of it. Power scalers tend to be very polarized when it comes to unbacked statements. Sometimes you'll have one group of people that will undoubtedly believe an unbacked statement, whereas you'll have a different group of people that will vehemently claim that that same statement is false. I think that a lot of the confusion stems from a misunderstanding of burden of proof. Just because you cannot prove a positive or prove a negative would not mean that the opposite would be true. In a lot of these cases, we don't know whether or not the statement is true. So the best option is to just put it in a we don't know category instead of an it is true or it is false category, and use values lower than it that we can prove with feats. Let's take a look at Whitebeard for example. Both Sengoku and Oda in a databook claim that Whitebeard can destroy the planet. If taken at face value and literally, this would put Whitebeard at planetary total joules. However, there are many other things to consider. For example, this could be meant as hyperbole. They could be talking about society. It could take multiple days for him to destroy the planet with multiple hits. After all, we have seen One Piece characters fight for days on end, including Whitebeard himself. So what kind of statements will I be using in this video? I will be using distance and size statements, as they are necessary to gauge the sizes of objects in fiction. Without these statements, we'd have to make assumptions based on real-life counterparts of these objects, which is less backed than just taking the statement given for their size in the series. If you can't tell by now, what I'm going to be doing is lowballing and using bare minimum values to scale Luffy. So with all of that out of the way, I can finally get into scaling AP. The single most impressive AP showing in the One Piece series comes from Blackbeard during the Marineford saga when he tilts the sea, creating multiple tsunamis with his earthquake. The lower end interpretation for the size of Marineford would be that the bottom half is at least 180 meters tall based off of the fact that it was taller than San Juan Wolf. This would make each of the tsunami's sizes 346, 311, and 307 meters. Plugging that into this formula, we find magnitudes of 10.9, 10.8, and 10.8 for the earthquakes. Then, via this formula, we can find the seismic energy in waves radiated from the earthquake source. Then, we can take that energy and multiply by about 19,500 to find the total seismic moment energy. This number comes out to around 7.6 times 10 to the 25 joules, which when divided by the volume of both of Blackbeard's hands, comes out to around 1.4 times 10 to the 22 joules per cubic centimeter, or high and small country level AP. And with Law being able to clash with this Blackbeard, that would also put him at small country level AP. During the Wano Country arc, Law is clearly surpassed in stats by Kaido. This same Kaido clashes with Luffy a few panels later, clearly showing that Luffy outstats Law. This puts Luffy in base, at high and small country level AP, but Luffy has forms that give him multipliers, so let's get into those. In Eni's lobby, we see that base Luffy is unable to even budge a metal wall, whereas Gear 3 Luffy completely shatters it. This, along with other showings, puts Gear 3 at least 5 times higher in AP than base Luffy. During the Whole Cake Island arc, Gear 3 Luffy tries to punch one of Cracker's shields, and not only is he completely unable to damage it, he's also sent back flying. When he enters Gear 4, he not only fragments that same shield, but he also sends Cracker flying back, coughing up blood. This showing puts Gear 4 at least 10 times above Gear 3, so all in all, Gear 4 would be at least 50 times higher in AP than base. This puts Gear 4 Luffy's AP at around 5.6 times 10 to the 23 joules per cubic centimeter, or low-end large country level AP. As for attacks where he stacks Gear 3 on top of Gear 4, those would reach 2.8 times 10 to the 24 joules per cubic centimeter, or high-end large country level AP, nearly continental AP. With the AP scaling section out of the way, I'd now like to take some time to answer some questions that some people might have. First of all, the reason that Gear 5 wasn't mentioned is because there's no gaugeable or notable increase in AP from Gear 4. Others might be wondering why I think base Luffy can clash with Kaido, then suddenly get 50 times stronger, and still be able to clash with Kaido. That's because Kaido was holding back throughout most of the fight. This is highlighted by the fact that at one point he says he's finally going to let loose, which is very deep into the fight, and also by the fact that he has multiple clashes where he doesn't split the sky, and then when Luffy comes back and has better mastery of Conqueror's Haki, they clash and they split the sky, clearly showing that the power that Kaido output there was greater than the power which he had output before, meaning he was holding back. The matter of the Bajrang gun is the same as that of Gear 5. Although it's clearly stronger than all of Luffy's other attacks, there is no quantifiable increase in AP, and therefore its AP is unknown, just some X amount greater than his other attacks. Also, I'll throw in the fact that even lowballing the volume of the Bajrang gun, it easily gets into Dwarf Star levels for total joules. And once again, with all of that out of the way, I can finally get into speed. What would the topic of speed in One Piece be without Kizaru? Some people think that the verse gets to FTL, FTL plus, MFTL, or even higher because of Kizaru, and other people think that the verse caps at light speed because of Kizaru. I'm here to give a different take than both. I don't think Kizaru's light speed in the first place. His light clearly shows physical properties, applying force to Luffy and sending him into a tailspin, which would require his light to have mass. The reason that natural light moves at light speed in the first place is because it doesn't have mass, meaning that Kizaru's light isn't necessarily light speed. Now I'm not saying that it can't be light speed because it has mass, I'm saying that it isn't necessarily light speed. And now that I've covered that, I can actually get into the feats for how fast One Piece characters are. In chapter 713, we see Fujitora pull a meteor from space. As speed is distance divided by time, I'll first be finding the distance at which he pulled this meteor from. In chapter 180 of One Piece, we're told that the Alabasta River is 50 kilometers in width. When we take that number and angsize with an aerial shot of Alabasta, we find that the One Piece atmosphere is at least 52,304 kilometers in height. We can then find the amount of time that it took the meteor to reach them by counting the number of words that they spoke, and using that in conjunction with the average words per minute of humans. When we do so, we find a time frame of 15.8 seconds, which gives the meteor a speed of Mach 7701. Then, we can calculate how much the meteor moved in relation to Doflamingo, and find that he has a speed of Mach 5157. While yes, Law did cut the meteor before Doflamingo did, Law's Devil Fruit allows him to bypass the need to apply opposite and equal force to be able to damage objects. Therefore, the meteor would not be slowed down by the time it reached Doflamingo. Later in the Dressrosa arc, Doflamingo and Gear 2 Luffy are shown to be relative in speed, both of them equally matching and sometimes blitzing the other. The interpretation that gets Luffy's speed lower would be to say that they are equal in speed. Therefore, I'll go with this so as to lowball. You'll see why in a second. When Luffy uses Gear 4 against Doflamingo, he's clearly at least a blitz tier above him, making him 2 times faster, which puts him at Mach 10,315. Now, as it's about to become relevant, I'll go over Gear 2 speed multiplier. During Enies lobby, Lucci consistently speed blitzes base Luffy, and then when Luffy enters Gear 2, he can blitz Lucci, meaning that he gets at least 4 times faster in that form, meaning that from base to Gear 4 would be an 8 times speed increase. During the Wano arc, we see base Kaido blitz Gear 4 Luffy with a Thunder Bagua. After this, Luffy goes through a training arc and has a better reaction in base. Sure, he's using Future Sight, but Kaido is still massively faster than him and can react to his movements. The fact that he can use Future Sight in the first place also shows that he could react in time in base, whereas he couldn't previously in Gear 4. The clear intention here is that Rooftop base Luffy has equal or greater speed than previous Gear 4 Luffy. So, where does this put Rooftop Gear 4 Luffy's speed? Mach 82,527, which is high-end sub-relativistic plus, nearing relativistic. Now, you might have noticed that the distance which I used for where Fujitora pulled the meteor from was actually inside the One Piece atmosphere. The reason that I did this was again for the sake of lowballing. Realistically, it should be tens of times further away, at which point you could say that Luffy is FTL, FTL plus, or even higher. But since I can't confirm anything, I can't use those values as a bare minimum, which is why I went for the sub-relativistic plus number. So, wrapping that all up, Luffy's regular attacks in Gear 5 would have large country AP, and his Bajrang gun would be at least 5 times higher than that, nearing continental AP. His speed is at least sub-relativistic plus, and most likely entering FTL, but nothing that's really provable. I hope you enjoyed this different take on scaling. If you want to see more of it, you can subscribe. I will be trying to put out more videos like this in the future. And without further ado, that will be it for today.